And I understand this stuff's hard to listen to, but it's discouraging even as a content creator when I see a comment on my YouTube of, oh, I had to turn it off, it's too much for me. And it's like, I get it. Some of these details are hard. And I try not to go into too much detail all the time. Not everybody needs to understand all the details to understand, the big picture. That's more important. But, it's like, gosh, we didn't have to live it, and how powerful it is, in our worst moments. If we think about if we have somebody pass away in our lives, or if we have a bad breakup, like all that stuff's very traumatic, and I ask people to think about, what if everybody in your life just abandoned you and was like, oh, you had a bad breakup and your heart's broken? Well, good for you. Go figure it out. You're crazy. You're acting crazy. It's like, gosh, how lonely and isolating that space is when all we want to do is be heard, and all we want to do is feel that compassion of somebody loving that is willing to look into that darkness with us. When she, or I should say, when you first started remembering, what was her initial reaction? Did she at any point not believe you, or was she so on board like the whole time as you were first coming to terms with these memories surfacing?
That's a great question. I can't say that she believed everything I was saying. I'll just be real transparent with you. It was a lot, y'all. And it's funny because you have two sides of that equation. You got me only telling her like this much. It's like probing. I'm going to tell you this much and see if you can handle that. She was really able to see and identify clearly that these other parts of my soul, like littles within me, she had seen these kinds of things going on. And for her, there was stuff that was very easy to understand, that like, yes, this is totally what's been going on. There was also a book that was very helpful for us that I don't know if I've really mentioned it much, but it's called The ABCs of DID. And it was like a PDF, and I'm sure it's still available today. It was put out by a ministry in South Africa, and it was predominantly, I think, written for counselors or pastors and people that are like in ministry fields that were encountering survivors, and that they're like, I don't know what the heck this stuff is. Like most pastors in seminary, they're never told anything about what the Bible says, unfortunately, in regards to all of this, because this stuff has been going on forever, y'all. And the Father didn't leave us without understanding. He loved us so much that he gave us this living word and this testimony. And like you were just even talking about a moment ago, people that say in the comments, I just had to turn it off, it was just too much for me, all the rest of that, it's because like even great Christian people that are lovers of the word, our Bibles have been so diminished from some of the capacity of information that used to be there. Like if you go back to the 1611 King James Bible, there's all these other books that were in there. Like one of those is the Maccabees, these books of the Maccabees, which was the time after Malachi, and where there was this abomination of desecration. King Antiochus, the Greeks came in and took over Jerusalem, and they started going into the temple and desecrating it and convincing everyone to eat pork and slaughter their children and do all of these horrible things. During the course of those events, if you read those books that used to be in our scriptures, there are such detailed accounts of the most horrific, satanic ritual abuse and torture, like graphic details of torture that you read about in the book of Hebrews. Like it talks about these heroes of faith who were sawn in two, who were torn asunder. Like you're like, where are all these accounts? They're in these other books that had been in our scriptures, that had always been in our scriptures, that were then ripped out because they showed, they validated, they endorsed what radical intelligent evil looks like when it puts on human flesh and skin suits and begins to exercise its dominion and its authority against the sons and daughters of righteousness. Like you see people that were willing to have their flesh torn apart from their bodies, mothers that witnessed their 7 sons being brutally tortured and admonishing them to keep the commandments of the Father, to not turn away from the instructions that you'd given them and imparted to them, to not defile themselves, like to be brave. Like you see these accounts of men who are brave and women who were brave and who are willing to stand up in the face of insurmountable odds and lose everything and not give in to the commandments of liars, like Moses' mother and father, who were like, they feared the Father more than they feared the sovereign's commands, the king's commands. They're like, you know what? Better to not slaughter my own son and to entrust him to the Father. Like there's these amazing accounts in the scriptures, but so many people won't even look at it. Like you said, they turn away from it. And I had to go into detail at times with Chelsea and say things to her that were so horrific. Like you guys think you hear some stuff because you watch survivors' accounts on YouTube. Like you have no comprehension of the level a visceral feeling of what it's like to sit in the room with another human being who comes completely unglued and shares with you vivid details of something so egregious as to watching children being consumed by their own parents. Like you can't even comprehend what that's like because you think you experience it through these black mirrors that we're communicating with. You don't understand what it feels like physically feels like to be in the presence of somebody like this. And so it's easier to insulate yourself with distance and to dismiss, to be like, I'm not going to even accept that as truth, rather than to just weigh into it for a minute and sit there and abide with somebody who's coming undone, like somebody who's just coming out of a car accident and they're frantic and they're confusing and they don't talk right. And you're like, yeah, because they're going through something bodily and mentally that is so beyond their capacity to communicate. But she was willing to sit there and at least stay with me. And she didn't understand it. She didn't quite comprehend what was going on. And the complexities as I shared more and more with her, and she didn't reject me, as I shared more and more of what was actually happening and more what had happened, and I began to pull out like the military records, and I began to pull out like the picture albums, and I began to show her some of these witnesses, it began to help her understand, okay, this definitely happened to my husband, but I don't totally get everything that happened. I don't understand it. It's not that she necessarily believed it either all the way, but she didn't reject it. And she didn't mock me or belittle me. However, we are promised that people are going to mock us. We're promised that people are going to treat us like this because we designed a system that socially engineered us to put the outliers back into the herd. Like we were raised in schools that taught us, if you're the outlier, you go do whatever you got to do to socially eradicate that person until they come back into the fold. Like people have been trained to do that. It's not innate. It's not like this in other societies and cultures. This was by design. They knew the witnesses are coming forward. Like, can I just read something really quick? It's Isaiah 65.
Please.
Like there's these prophecies, y'all, about survivors that they're going to come out in the last days, and they are literally to be the witnesses to the nations. Like you were born to go and share your testimony to the nations. It's literally what you're here for. If you've survived, I know a lot of them didn't. Like I know a lot of brothers and sisters that died. I know lots of them just gave up. I know they quit. I would have. I wanted to die so much. I wanted to die, but you know what? I was preserved. And if you're alive and you're hearing this today, I don't care if you're 80 years old or you're 8 years old, like you have to be willing to lay your life down and speak the truth. Speak the truth no matter what it costs you, because in a society of deception, telling the truth is a truly dangerous thing, but that's awesome. We should be excited to step into danger. We should be eager to embrace dangerous situations, because you know what? It's more dangerous for you to get in the car and drive to the store than it is for you to speak the truth. It is inherently, statistically. They can't kill us all, y'all. There's tens of millions of us, and there's more every single day. But you know what's so beautiful is we outnumber them on such an impossibly high numerical order that they are terrified of us every single day of their life. There's a reason that kings go to sleep and tremble, because you know what? The Father can send a dream to Pharaoh in a night, or Nebuchadnezzar in a night, or Nimrod in a night that dismantles them completely. And he does that all the time. He will send them dreams and visions of their destruction. And you know what? It's inevitable. It's unstoppable, because the word of Yahweh can never be broken. And so when he sends these judgments against them, they know the day of Yahweh is unavoidable, and they're going to try to see the mountains themselves to cover them. They're trying to bury themselves in and insulate themselves from the impending doom. They're living in bondage. And so if you stand there as a witness, as the person who goes about in sheep's clothing, as a deranged idiot in the woods, your confidence in your convictions is so compelling to people that you know what? They can't fight against it, because they have no confidence to stand on. They don't have any sure footing. They are living in mire and muck that is so deep that they are like quadriplegics trying to climb their way to the top of a mountain, and they're using nothing but their lying lips to get themselves there. But you know what? When you have the firm foundations of the living words of truth building you up from the inside, it makes you so terrifying to the people who are the tormentors of men and women and children that they flee at your presence. When I confronted my father, when I confronted my family members, like there was this crazy, ridiculous showdown that ended up taking place the last time I talked to my father. I don't even know if I wrote about it in the book, but it was like I went to go talk to my closest sister. I was going to meet her at a park that was like about halfway between her and I in Golden, Colorado. And I didn't tell anybody else, but Chelsea and I went, and she had a bunch of children. So we met at a splash pad, place where little children run around in chemically treated water, and they play and they think it's fun. They forget that creeks exist. They're amazing, y'all. Go to the creeks, get out of the pools that poison your soul. Anyways, check this out. She was like, Chelsea went with me because I was a little fragile, full disclosure, super fragile, mostly unstable, but still a little bit rooted in reality. And it was good. And I just wanted to talk to my sister. I wanted her to hear it from my lips. I wanted her to physically sit in front of me and be able to hear my testimony. And I got there and I literally started to talk to her. And all of a sudden my dad showed up. And it was like, it was a war that I've been waiting my whole life for, like an opportunity to confront somebody. It's like I know some survivors, they just want their abusers are dead, and they wanted that opportunity to sit down and just get after them, you know? And I had never in my life felt the power of what they call the Holy Spirit, like the spirit of truth that leads you to remember all the things that they said. Like if you read this book, it's a living book that comes into you and it changes you. And like those words can be drawn upon for the rest of your life. Like they really can be with you the rest of your life. And my dad raised me in a Christian home. My dad did everything he can, I think, to try to raise me on one side as a man of God, as a man of belief, as a man who cared about the truth. And at the same time, there was another half of my dad that was so deeply in debt to the Prince of Darkness that he could not get out of it, and it wouldn't let him out. And I got to lay out in front of him what had taken place, and that I was not going to stand there and be silent, because my dad made me promise him when I confessed all these things to him. He believed it. He validated it. He had agreed with it in private. And he said, whatever, you can tell anybody you want. Don't you dare tell your sisters. And he just kept saying that to me. And Chelsea was always like, why? That's so weird. And he just didn't want me to tell my sisters, no matter what. He didn't care who I told. Just don't tell your sisters. But then he showed up there because I was telling my sisters, and he was just so enraged. And there was a presence that came on him when I was rebuking him for failing to be a father, to failing to guard his children, failing to do these things. Like, I told him that I didn't know why, but when this other presence came on him, and he was cursing and screaming, and my dad had never in my life, he never cussed. He never screamed. He never displayed anger. And he was enraged. And there's all these little children running around playing at the splash pad. And here's this like fully demonized guy screaming and cussing at the top of his lungs. And like this couple just sitting there in front of him. But I had told him that the mantle of authority of headship that he had over the Reynolds family had been revoked. And he went nuts. This other spirit came over him, and he was speaking with icy words, but he rose up and was screaming curses at me and screaming all these specific mind control triggers of like, you're going to go crazy, you're going to do this and that and this, and you're going to lose your marriage, and she's going to divorce you. I mean, all these horrible curses, like the last things a father could say to his son, every curse he could possibly come up with. But it's not him. It's what's consuming him. The generational principality that's been governing the Reynolds family for all these years. The great dragon that has been ruling this dynastic bloodline of despair was losing his seat of authority, right? He was being revoked. And he was literally running away from me, like I was a gunman, you know? And all I was using was the sword in my mouth. And I saw him run in terror, get in his car and just peel out of there. And Chelsea was sitting there like, what is going on? She was like, oh my gosh, because she'd never seen any of that stuff in my dad. You know, my dad had always been like my best friend, the good guy, the happy guy. And then it was just like in front of all these people. And she's like, this is crazy. And then he called and was trying to convince me to go tell specifically these specific police officers in Lake Havasu City. I want you to file specific reports in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. And I recorded all these calls and these conversations at the time when I was meeting with my family. And because they still, the brotherhood of the family is still very, very active down there. And he was wanting to set me up for all these other things. But I got to see and witness what can happen in that moment of when ultimate evil confronts truth. And you know what? Evil always flees. Evil always sees. It says, humble yourselves, therefore, before the mighty face of Yahweh, and resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And I got to see that. I got to see what it's like to see the devil flee at the presence of truth. Like, yeah, Yeshua has this ultimate showdown after 40 days of fasting, totally exhausted and hungry. They're like, and he was hungry after 40 days. I'm like, the greatest understatement in the entire Bible. And he's like, just turn these stones to bread and you can eat some of it. And he's all like rebuking him with the word, like short, synoptic, just precise Cliff Notes versions of Deuteronomy, of the Torah, and like the scripture. You're like, dude was just assassinating him, and he fled. It literally says he fled from him, looking for a more opportune time. And the reason he's like this is because he's compared to a lion, y'all. And I've been studying lions my whole life. I love them. I life dream is to wrestle lions. I love it. I go into their caves and dens. I want to get my hands on lions. They're the embodiment of these adversaries and these incredible creatures and these royalty that we see. But like, there's a reason a lion, like mountain lions in particular, when they ambush things, they jump on their backs, they go for the throat, they try to kill them and pierce their skull, because they can't fight. A lion can't actually really fight with you. You may think it can't, but it really can't, because they're cats, and if their bones are fragile and light, and they can break very easily. And if they're injured, they're going to die. They will not be able to feed themselves, and so they flee. Once they realize that their target is actually putting up the fight, they flee as fast as they can. And that is the reality of our adversaries, y'all. Once you actually get engaged in combat with them, once you fully stand up and refuse to lie down, refuse, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Azariah, Mishael, and Hananiah, like, they refuse to bow at the sovereign's command. They're like, everybody in the whole world's bowing down to this great statue of Nebuchadnezzar. And then you got these three dudes just standing there, and they're like, what the heck? Dang it, kill him. And then they're like, hey, you don't have the power of fire. You guys think just because you can light a match and put some pitch in a fire pit that you can kill us. They're like, Yahuwah is sovereign over the fires. He surely can deliver us. And even if he doesn't, he's still the sovereign. And it's like, they were thrown into the fire so that everyone in the world could see the Son of Righteousness in the flames. Like, I was thrown into the fire so that the rest of the world could see the Son of Righteousness amidst my consuming destruction. You know, you guys, some of you think because you lived, like, you're just worthless now. Like, you think your identity got destroyed, but you don't understand the fires that you survived, y'all, have refined you and made you for they've hardened you like a knife, y'all. Like a knife has a very sharp edge only so much as how hard it is. Like, if this knife, and I go to use it, the more I use it, the edge is going to get duller and duller and duller. But if I harden it, if I heat treat it to very specific temperatures for very specific amounts of times and cool it in a very specific fashion, if I do that in the right order, this thing will endure the testing of use. It endures that, right? You, by going through these situations and these experiences throughout your life, it has hardened you. It has forged you for a purpose. And you know what? That's why they fear us. That's why they try to force us down through these fickle little words that they have, through these semantics, through these labelings, through these the Bible of the psychologist's world, their little two-edged sword, the DSM-5, these with 60,000 invented diseases that are not reality, y'all. There is not a test for bipolar disorder, y'all. There is not a test for ADHD for a reason, because you cannot funnel people through a psychological and pharmaceutical industry without creating some kind of contrived diseases. You do not have bipolar disorder, y'all. You do not have paranoid schizophrenia. You do not have epilepsy, y'all. You have a need to understand your identity and your purpose, and you need deliverance and healing, bodily, soul, and spirit. And you know what? That comes by knowing your purpose. And Isaiah 65 and 66 has that so plainly written out that you guys can understand, you know what? Though I went through all this stuff, that's not what defines me. What defines me is I have my mouth still. I still have my words. I still have my convictions. And you know what? He literally said that this is what's going to happen in the end of days. Check this out, y'all. Oh, yeah, here you go. People think this stuff isn't in the Bible. And a lot of Christian churches, I don't mean to pick on the denominations, but there's like 40,000 denominations, and every single one of them is like the daughter to the daughter of Babylon. And so, like, a lot of people have been trained to not actually read their Bibles. The single, like I said, the aptitude that I just expressed early on was reading and comprehension. And like, if you all just pick this thing up and read it from beginning to end, it makes you so much deadlier, because they prey on our inability to read. Like, I had people who told me when I wrote my book, I needed to write it at a third grade level, because that's the comprehending ability of our society today. Like this is professional editors and publishers. They're like, you got to write it about a third grade level for somebody to be able to read your book. And that just sat like a lead brick in my stomach, because this is not reality. We had to get trained this way, but you know what? You can train yourself out of it, and it's by discipline and by diligence. And here's what Isaiah 66 says. I'm going to read a chapter of the scriptures, because you know what? Y'all need it, and I need it too. Thus said Yahuwah, the heavens are my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is this house that you build for me? And where is the place of my rest? And all these my hands has made, all these that exist, declares Yahuwah. Yet to such a one I look for, on him who is poor and crushed of spirit, and who trembles at my word. But whoever slays the bull strikes a man. Whoever slaughters the lamb breaks a dog's neck. Whoever brings a grain offerings, pig's blood. Whoever burns incense blesses an idol. Indeed, they have chosen their own ways, and their being delights in their abominations. I shall also choose their punishments and bring their fears on them. Because I called, but no one answered. I spoke, and they did not hear. And they did evil before my eyes and chose what was displeasing to me. Hear the word of Yahuwah, you who tremble at his word. Your brothers who hate you, who cast you out for my name's sake, said Yahuwah, be esteemed, so that we see your joy. But they are put to shame. A roaring sound from the city, a voice from the Hakal, the temple, the voice of Yahuwah, repaying his enemies. Before she labored, she gave birth. Before it came pain to her, she was delivered of a male. Who has heard the like of this? Who has seen the like of this? Is a land brought forth in a day? Is a nation born at once? For as soon as Zion labored, she gave birth to her children. Shall I bring to birth and not give delivery, says Yahuwah? Shall I who give delivery restrain birth, said your Elohim? Rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad with her. All you who love her, rejoice greatly with her. All you who mourn for her, so that you feed and shall be satisfied with the breast of her comfort, so that you drink deeply and delight yourselves in overflowing esteem. For thus said Yahuwah, I am extending peace to her like a river, and the esteem of the nations like a flowing stream, and you shall feed, and shall be carried on the side, and fondled on her knees. As one whom his mother comforts, so I will comfort you. And in Jerusalem you are comforted, and you shall see, and your heart shall rejoice, and your bones flourish as tender grass. And the hand of Yahuwah shall be known to his servants, and his displeasure to his enemies. For look, Yahuwah comes with fire, and with his chariots like a whirlwind, to render his displeasure with burning, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by his sword Yahuwah shall judge all flesh, and the slain of Yahuwah shall be many. Those who set themselves apart. This is literally describing SRH. Those who set themselves apart and cleanse themselves in their gardens after ones that are in their midst, eating the flesh of pigs and the abominations and the mouse, they shall be snatched away together, declares Yahuwah. And I, because of their works and their imaginations, am coming to gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my esteem. And I shall set a sign among them, and shall send some of the survivors to the nations, Tarshish and Pul and Lud, who draw the ball, and Tubal and Yawan, the coastlands afar off, who have not heard my report, nor seen my esteem. They shall declare my esteem among the nations, and they shall bring all your brothers as an offering to Yahuwah out of all the nations, on horses and in chariots and in litters and on mules and camels, to my set apart mountain, Jerusalem, declares Yahuwah. As the children of Israel bring an offering in to cleanse the house of Yahuwah. And from them too I shall take for priests, for Levites, declares Yahuwah. For as the new heavens and the new earth that I make stand before me, declares Yahuwah, so your seed and your name shall stand. And it shall be that from new moon to new moon, from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahuwah. And they shall go forth and look on the corpses of the men who have transgressed against me. For their worms shall not die, and their fire shall not be quenched, and they shall be repulsive to all flesh. You survivors are made to go and bring the witnesses to the nations. And by doing so, you're going to find your brothers out there. You're going to find your sisters out there. You're going to find your mother and your father out there. You're going to find that there's a family of people out there that you can never know unless you're willing to go through the scourge of public accusations and mockings, going through the wilderness of the deserts, the 40 days of starving, until you go to that place of testing and abandonment by everybody else, and you find your purpose and your identity out there in the wilderness. He will restore it to you, and then he will send you back to the nations. It's literally what John the Baptist was born for. They came to hunt him and murder him when he was an infant, and his father did not allow the sovereigns to touch his son. He sent his mother and his son away into the wilderness. He let them go be entrusted to the hands of Yahuwah, and he gave up his life to the assassins, Hashashin, the zealots that were sent by the king to cut it out of him, to torture him, to tell him where his son was. And you know what? He's like, You can have my life. I give it down for my son. That's the right move if you're a father. You give up your life for your children. You give up your life if you're the mother. You give up your life for your children. We sons should not be the ones who have to give up our lives so that our fathers and mothers have to live. But you know what? We will, because we love them and because we love the word of Yahuwah. So I eagerly contend for each and every one of you survivors. Share your testimony, because it says in Revelation 12:11, the enemy is defeated by the blood of the Lamb, the words of our testimony, and not loving our lives when faced with death. So be bold and willing to share your story no matter the cost, because you know what? By doing so, you're going to find the freedom that was promised to you from before the foundations of the world.
Oh my goodness. That was incredible. What words of encouragement for people, because that can be so scary. I get people that reach out to me and they're like, I want to tell you my testimony. I'm not ready to tell other people. And I'm like, that's okay. Get it out. Tell somebody. That's so huge, just to reach out to somebody. You're breaking every curse. It's like that lifts the spell that they cast on you as you're growing up. That's exactly what they invest all this time and money and energy and resources and handlers and plants and gosh, blackmail and all of it. Like, that's why they do it, is so you don't share your testimony. And it's so incredibly powerful when you can stand in that. I had a survivor that I interviewed a couple times now, and she said a quote that like just sent chills down my body, and I got a lot of comments on it on her show. And she said about her abusers, it feels like they honed a really sharp weapon and now it's pointed at them. And I was like, yes, girl, that's it. Like, take back those gifts that they exploited. Like, you were born a divine child of God with these amazing gifts and talents. They saw it in you, and that's why you were chosen, except they exploited those gifts and made you feel guilty, and you got punished for having them, and you got tortured. It's like the more gifted you are, like the more torture you had to go through. It's so inverted. And that's how we create a better world, is literally by creating it. Like the world that we live in right now was created by them. This is Lucifer's kingdom that they've shoved us all in and infiltrated. And we can easily bring God and Jesus and our divination back by creating those things in our heart, and by speaking that truth and bringing it out, and getting rid of all the spells that they cast on it. And your testimony is such a strong, it's just so beautiful how you're able to recognize that, because I feel like a lot of people, even throughout their entire journey, they might not ever get there. And it clicks different when you hear somebody that went through that and they're saying, hey, I'm still here. Like, I faced my worst fear. Like, I thought all these bad things were going to happen, and they did. Like, you were attacked. You were talking about that earlier. They tried to kill you, literally. So it's not that you didn't do this without consequence. And I know that there are people that are still enslaved that can't, they might not right at this moment, but that should be the goal, is for us to reclaim back those beautiful things about us that we've been led to shame, and to feel guilty about, and the things that they saw in us that they exploited, and to take them back and say, these are mine. What did God give these gifts to me for? What can I bring into the world? What can I create that's different from what they used me for? And you're doing it in so many ways. You have your book, your YouTube channel, you have your ministries, and you have just all these beautiful business ventures that you're doing. And it's just really lovely, Nathan. I love that you bring that hope, because these topics do get so dark, and I think for people, it can feel hopeless when you hear about these horrible things that happen. People get in this mind state where they're like, this is the world that we live in. This is horrific, and all these people are involved. Like, what are we going to do to combat it? And it's easier, like you said, to just maybe go back to living and not looking at it, because it feels so daunting, and I think you do a really fantastic job of outlining how all this works, the who's, when's, where's, what's about it, but you also give solutions, which I think is really beautiful. And you're living the creations that were in your heart, like you and your wife have brought to life so many amazing things. So I just want to commend you. That was a really beautiful verse that you shared. And that was so lovely. All the words of encouragement that you gave to survivors.